I'm 70 thankful now. And I raised my daughter alone for 28 years. I believed I understood what that meant, what that sacrifice entailed. I was mistaken. People tell me I was brave, that I did the right thing. But what if the very thing you poured your entire life into, the thing you gave everything for, was actually the quiet beginning of its undoing? What if love, the kind that binds so tightly, and a kind of gentle, well-meaning captivity, have more in common than we're comfortable admitting? I remember being a young mother, abandoned, standing in my own kitchen at 2 a.m., my 18-month-old daughter small and warm against my chest, her father's truck fading into the night down our street. You make a promise then, not out loud, not with words you speak, but deep in your bones, a silent vow whispered into the soft hair near her fontanelle, where you can still feel her pulse through your fingers. A promise that settles like a quiet stone in your heart. I will be enough for both of us. Do you believe it? You have to. Because the alternative is the sort of being utterly alone in a kitchen while your baby cries, with nothing but your own shaking hands to make things right, is too heavy, too impossible to bear. So you make that promise, and you spend the next 28 years living it, breathing it, upholding it every single day. People often say motherhood is sacrifice. They say it as if it's inherently noble, as if the pain itself has some built-in meaning, some automatic redemption. But I want to tell you what I know now. After all these years, sacrifice is often just another word, a softer term, for the things we do because we are absolutely terrified of losing what we love. And sometimes the person you are so afraid to lose isn't just the child in front of you, the one you brought into this world. Sometimes the deepest fear is losing the version of yourself that was carefully, lovingly built around being utterly needed, around having an irreplaceable purpose. It's a quiet truth, one many of us recognize but rarely voice. 28 years. That's enough time to forget where your hands end and hers begin. Enough time for lives to intertwine so completely you can't imagine them apart. I worked double shifts at the hospital, from 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. Then I raced to pick up my daughter from Senora Henderson's house, our kind neighbor with the creaky swing, who always had lemonade in summer and warm cocoa in winter. We'd go home, and my second shift would begin. Laundry, homework, little breakfast wrapped in foil with notes tucked inside. You are braver than you know. I'm proud of you. I was trying to fill something in her, a void I felt her father had left. I remember the house always smelled of my Estée Lauder perfume, the one I bought myself each Christmas, and cold cream. My hands were always so tired. The calluses never truly faded. And I think, this is proof. This is what love looks like. At every parent-teacher conference, I'd sit in those tiny chairs, trying to fold myself small enough to fit. And the teacher would tell me what a bright, serious, good girl my daughter was. And I'd feel something, a small but significant weight lifting from my shoulders. My daughter, her accomplishments, they were evidence. Evidence that I hadn't failed, that one person raising another, alone in Guadalajara, could make it right, that I could indeed be enough. I remember thinking, it matters. Everything matters. Every note I left, every shift I worked, every tired moment, it all matters. The day she graduated, I borrowed Esperanza's camera. My hands shook so much I almost dropped it when they called her name. She walked across the stage, her cap a little askew, and when she turned and smiled into the gym, I knew she was smiling for me. I still have that photograph. It sits on my dresser. I can almost feel the humidity of that gym on my skin. Hear the roar of the applause as if it were happening right now. I remember that swelling in my chest, a feeling I thought meant I had finally triumphantly succeeded. She was beautiful and brilliant, and she was alive because of me. Now we'll always be together, I thought. Finally, everything will make sense. That, you see, was the lie I told myself. The lie was this, that if I gave her everything, if I worked hard enough, sacrificed loudly enough, made my love impossible to ignore, made myself impossible to overlook, she would stay, not physically perhaps, but in her heart, in her essential being. She would love me back in the exact same measure, a perfect equation, input and output, love and return. And never once did I ask myself if it was fair to ask that of another human being. Never once did I wonder if love was ever meant to be a negotiation, a transaction. Never once did I consider that perhaps, just perhaps, the person you're trying to hold on to forever doesn't actually want to be held in that way. Then she met a man named Roberto. At first it was fine. He came for dinner. He was polite. He wore a shirt with a pressed collar. I made beef stew, the way my mother taught me, which took me hours. The three of us sat at my table, the very table where she and I had sat alone for so many years, where I had fed her every meal of her childhood. I watched her laugh at his jokes, laugh in a way I hadn't heard from her before, and I felt the floor beneath me begin to shift. Not all at once, just a tiny crack, an almost imperceptible fracture in the careful thing I had spent my entire life building. The phone calls began to grow shorter. Hello, Mom. Can't talk long. Not just shorter, but rarer. Sundays were our day. She'd call, and we'd talk for an hour while I made coffee. That stopped. I'd sit by the phone on Sunday afternoons. I'd wait, and the phone wouldn't ring. I remember one Sunday, my second cup of coffee, optimistically poured, even though the phone hadn't rung in weeks, and the house was so silent I could hear the refrigerator humming. I was 68 years old, sitting in a kitchen that had been the absolute center of my life, learning what it feels like when everything you know simply dissolves without your permission. This is where loneliness becomes more than just being alone in a room. It becomes a silence that echoes, a space where expectation once lived. I started showing up at her apartment unannounced, always with groceries. I tell myself I was being helpful. What I was doing, though, was refusing to accept that I was no longer the center of her world. I'd stand in her living room and watch her face change. Mom, I wish you'd call first, she'd say. I'd smile and lie. Oh, I was just in the neighborhood. I had driven 40 minutes with groceries she hadn't asked for. I couldn't bear to leave her alone. I was afraid that I wasn't there, constantly reminding her that I existed. She would simply forget. She would choose him, and then who would I be? Just an old woman, just silence, just Sundays without calls. Now I see that I was suffocating her, that every unannounced visit was a tightening rope. Every note I left, every bag of groceries, every silent reminder of how much I had given, I see it now. But I didn't then. Then I called it love. I called it being a good mother. I called it duty and protection and all the noble words we use to make our own quiet desperation sound honorable. The argument happened on a Tuesday. She said I couldn't just show up unannounced anymore. She said I was intrusive. You've never let me breathe, she said. Something in my chest just cracked open, because I knew with a certainty that shook me to my core that it was true, and I had no defense for it. How do you defend the entire architecture of your life? How do you tell someone that every stifling thing you did was because you were absolutely terrified of being alone? She didn't say it, but I heard it. Go. I went home and sat in my kitchen, the faucet dripping. Just drip, drip, drip. For 3 days, I barely moved. I called work, said I was sick. I told Esperanza I had the flu. I was waiting for my daughter to call, to apologize, to make it right. I was sure she would. She didn't. It was Esperanza who showed me the photos. She meant well. She'd seen them on Facebook. She thought maybe I already knew, that perhaps I was just being private about the wedding. She pulled out her phone, her face tight and careful. I could see the discomfort in her, the way she braced herself for my reaction. And she showed me the pictures. My daughter in a white dress, flowers in her hair that I hadn't chosen. Her father, my ex-husband, the man who abandoned us when she was 18 months old. The man I protected her from for 28 years, standing beside her in a tuxedo that cost more than I made in a month, his hand on her arm as if he had some right to give her away, as if he'd been there for any of the nights I held her when she was sick, as if he'd paid for her education, and my daughter was smiling at him. That's what the photo showed me. More than the fact that I wasn't invited, it showed me she was smiling at him, that she looked happy, that she looked like herself, and that meant she had been becoming herself without me all along. I just hadn't allowed myself to see it. I left Esperanza's house without speaking. My throat had closed up. I sat in my car, unable to start the engine. I drove home and opened my closet. There it was, the light blue dress with the price tag still attached. I had bought it 3 months before the wedding, certain the invitation would come. Yet I walked past it every day for months, whispering, "I'll wear it soon." To her wedding. My place, my seat in the front row. I had even had it altered. 65 pesos. The seamstress, Señora Chen, had asked me about the occasion. I told her it was my daughter's wedding. I believed somehow that if I said it enough times, if I made it fit, it would be true. I sat on the floor of my closet in the dark, holding that dress with the price tag still on, as if it had never been worn. Perfect. Unmarried. In that moment, a profound understanding settled over me. I had always been waiting. My entire life with my daughter was one long wait for proof that what I had sacrificed meant something, for validation that my pain had a purpose, that I was good. As I sat in that dark closet, with a dress that would never be worn, I understood that the proof, the validation, would never come from her. The rage came first, like a storm tearing through my chest, hot, dark, consuming. I wanted to collar and scream. How could you invite the man who abandoned us and not invite me? The woman who raised you, the boyfriends I didn't pursue, the jobs I turned down, the life I didn't live. I wanted to make her hurt, to feel a fraction of what I felt. But I was 75 years old, and I knew, in that deep, quiet place, that rage is often just love with nowhere left to go. Love poured into a vessel for so long, now overflowing, with no soft place left to land. I called Dolores, my lifelong friend. We've known each other for 23 years. She held my hand when my husband left. I told her everything. She invited her father, the man who abandoned us. My voice broke. Dolores listened. She didn't try to fix it. When I finished, she said quietly, perhaps she invited him because he was never a threat. Perhaps that made him safe. I didn't want to hear that, but I heard it. And this is the part most people never say out loud. I stopped waiting for an explanation, or an apology, or an invitation for Sunday coffee. I stopped calling every Sunday. I stopped showing up at her apartment. I stopped leaving notes on her car. I slowly started coming back to myself. I returned to the bookstore. David, the owner, was patient. One day, I just walked back in, and he gave me my schedule, and I started shelving books again. People would come to the counter with novels and biographies and children's books. I'd wrap them in brown paper. Sometimes people smiled, and I'd smile back. I was still here. I was still alive. That meant something. It had to mean something. I started walking in the mornings again. Before anyone else was awake, I'd put on my old denim coat and walk through the neighborhood when it was gray and cold. The streets were empty. It felt like being the only person awake in the world. But there were birds, singing even when everything else was asleep. When the houses were dark, I realized they never asked permission to sing. They just sang. They didn't need to be invited or wanted or validated. They simply existed, and that was enough. One morning, about 6 months after the wedding, I was tidying some old things in my dresser, moving aside handkerchiefs and jewelry I never wore anymore. And I found a letter. It was addressed to my daughter, and it was in my handwriting, but I had absolutely no memory of writing it. It was dated 30 years ago. She would have been 5 years old then. The letter read, "My dearest love, I want you to know you owe me nothing. Not gratitude, not your time, not your life. You are made to fly, and I am made to let you go. I want you to be free more than I want you to need me. When you are older, I hope you forgive me for all the times I forgot this. For all the times I tried to clip your wings because I was afraid of what would happen if you flew. With love, Mom." I had written it when she was 5. I had meant every single word, and then I had spent the next 23 years trying to erase it, trying to replace that promise with a different kind of love. The kind that holds, the kind that grips tight, the kind that builds cages with the very best intentions. The light blue dress still hangs in the closet. I stopped moving it. Sometimes I look at it without feeling anything, except that it exists. It's a dress. My daughter is alive. She is loved. She made a choice, not mine, never mine. I think of my ex-husband standing beside her, giving her away. He had already abandoned her. He couldn't take anything from me that I hadn't already lost. What he gave her was the only thing he could, the absence of expectation, the space to become who she was without anyone measuring her against a dream, without the weight of unspoken gratitude. I couldn't give her that. I was too busy building a future where my sacrifice would equal a guaranteed return. My daughter and I don't speak. I don't know if we ever will. Some stories don't have endings where everyone comes back together and apologizes. Some stories don't resolve neatly. Some stories just end with you learning to live differently, with you waking up at 75 and understanding that the thing you sacrificed everything for was your own smallness. The cage wasn't for her. It was for me. I built it to keep myself from falling apart. I built it to keep myself from being invisible. I built it to keep myself from being alone. This is where loneliness becomes more than being alone. It becomes an invitation to truly see yourself. I am still here. In the mornings I make coffee. I read the newspaper. I look at the crossword puzzle. Sometimes I can do it, sometimes I can't. I walk past Esperanza's house and we wave to each other. She doesn't ask me about my daughter anymore. Sometimes I walk to the senior center on Thursdays. They have bingo and I play. Sometimes I win a small prize. And sometimes I come home with nothing but the memory of other old women laughing. I work at the bookstore. I am kind to people I don't know. I am less angry than I was. I am also more alone, which I suppose is simply another way of saying I am more honest. Loneliness is just honesty without the performance, a stripping away of all the elaborate ways we try to avoid facing ourselves. My daughter is alive. She is loved. I helped make her. I didn't know how to let her go. But I am learning now. It's a slow thing, learning to release someone when you've held on to them so tightly for so long. Some days I do better than others. Some mornings I wake up and don't think of her first. Those mornings feel like freedom. They also feel like a kind of quiet betrayal of the past. But mainly, they feel like the only way to move forward. The house is silent now, but it isn't the bad silence of before. It isn't the silence of waiting. Itan is the silence of a phone that won't ring. Itan is just silence. The sound of a life being lived by one person, for one person, without anyone else having to answer for it, and I am learning to sit in it. I am learning that silence can be a place you choose, not just a place where you end up. It's a quiet space where self-respect can begin to take root. That's the story. That's what I learned at 75, when I was already supposed to know everything. I learned that you can love someone so fiercely that you accidentally build them a prison, and the only way to free them is to accept that you have to free them from you. You have to look at your own hands, the hands that fed them, held them, built walls to keep them safe, and you have to open them. You have to let go. You have to be willing to mean nothing to them so that they can mean everything to themselves. And perhaps in doing that you might just become something for yourself again too. Not everything, perhaps, but something. And maybe after all this, get this enough. I don't know if this is wisdom. It might just be what happens when you're old enough to finally see the damage. The quiet patterns we repeat across generations. But I'm telling you this anyway, because if you're here, listening to me, if you've stayed with me this long, I want to ask you something. Have you been holding someone too tight? Have you been building a cage of love? However unintentional, have you been pouring yourself into someone else as if they were the only vessel that could hold what you had to give? Think about this. In the quiet of your own home, notice how your home feels in the evening when no one visits, not as a judgment but as an observation. This isn't weakness, it is a human response to a life well lived, a heart that has loved deeply. Some people might ask, maybe I am just too sensitive. My dear, feeling deeply after a lifetime of loving is not sensitivity. It is a sign of a rich inner world. It means your heart has noticed a change, and that's okay. Then there's, my children are busy. Should I feel hurt? It's natural for children to have their own lives. Feeling hurt isn't about blaming them. It's about acknowledging your own needs and the changing nature of relationships. Your feelings are valid, even when their reasons are understandable. Is it too late to rebuild closeness? Family distance is complex, and rebuilding takes time and understanding from all sides. What's never too late is understanding your own boundaries and finding peace within yourself, regardless of what others do. Is loneliness just part of getting older? Loneliness can certainly be a companion in later life, but it doesn't have to define it. It's a feeling that often prompts us to reflect on family roles changing with age, unspoken expectations, and our need for dignity and connection. Recognizing these connections can help us understand the feeling more clearly. And perhaps you're wondering, should I stop expecting anything from my family? Expecting less of others doesn't mean you love them less. It means you are choosing to nurture your own self-respect and emotional boundaries. It means understanding that while every family is different, every heart needs to protect its own peace. When these pieces are understood, the changing family roles, the unspoken expectations, the subtle grief of lost connections, and the quiet dignity of finding your own peace, the heart truly has more room to breathe. Loneliness is not an isolated problem. It's often connected to how we manage our memories, our sense of usefulness, and our acceptance of silence. If my story means something to someone besides me, then perhaps that dress in my closet isn't just a sad thing anymore. Perhaps it's a small piece of redemption. Perhaps it's a quiet reminder that the love you poured out, even when it couldn't be received in the way you hoped, is still love. And maybe that is enough. If this story spoke to you, I'd love to hear it. Write Soledad in the comments below if the quiet house feels heavy sometimes, and tell me one small thing that makes you feel less alone. Something quiet and everyday. Share this with one other older person who might need this reflection. And if you found some comfort here, please consider liking this video. It helps others who might be feeling this quiet pain find their way to these stories. You can subscribe if you'd like to return for more honest reflections, but mainly, I am just grateful you sat with me for this time. That's all. It's more than I thought I'd get. This content is educational only and not personal advice. For deeper concerns, consider speaking with a trusted professional